We're back for your ears only. I'm Melissa Axelberth.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. Not only Christ sacrificing himself on our behalf, but it's also the golden rule, treat others the way you would want to be treated. That was President Obama connecting his religious beliefs with a long-evolving decision to support same-sex marriage, even as North Carolina, a key state for his campaign, became the 30th to ban it. But analysts said Obama had already lost voters who disagree on the issue and might re-energize gay marriage supporters and other liberals who had come to doubt his convictions. Mitt Romney, meanwhile, repeated his opposition to gay marriage, even civil unions, and apologized after reports he had bullied effeminate-seeming students as a teen in boarding school. Now this.
The access to information that enables us to identify persons both within the United States but also without the United States that would hurt us, but also our intelligence agencies to operate overseas to pull in this information has been essential and remains essential.
FBI Director Robert Mueller on Capitol Hill last week stressed the importance of electronic surveillance in the wake of news that another al-Qaeda airline bomb plot had been foiled. But it turned out the real key was an old-fashioned double agent, Saudi with a British passport by some accounts, who penetrated the terrorist group, volunteered for the suicide mission with a new form of underwear bomb, then turned it over for analysis by U.S. intelligence.
News accounts of that operation triggered another Obama administration leak investigation, but they may also be causing internal problems of confusion, suspicion, even some paralysis within al-Qaeda, associated terror and Islamist groups, even as they continue to make inroads in Syria, Libya, North Africa, and elsewhere. To consider all that, we're joined again by Dr. Walid Phares, a professor of global strategies and advisor to the U.S. House of Representatives Anti-Terrorism Caucus. His latest book is The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, from Threshold Editions. Welcome back to our program.
Thank you for having me.
After all the talk about al-Qaeda being too close-knit and clan-like to be easily infiltrated, were you surprised that this double agent succeeded?
No, not at all. I mean, in the volume of how many al-Qaeda strikes have occurred, not just against the United States, but also liberal democracies and in the Arab and Muslim world, for us to be able, or the West or the United States or its allies, to be able to infiltrate, to place one successful individual inside the al-Qaeda network, that's a reason to be, satisfied, but that's not a reason to be surprised. That's what we should be doing all the time, everywhere against al-Qaeda.
Does it show al-Qaeda's desperation at this point, deteriorating security standards?
I don't think al-Qaeda now is what it has been described by many, including in Washington or some other quarters. Al-Qaeda's real objective is to seize land, seize territory, penetrate societies, and that's what it's doing in the big picture. Now, of course, we are scoring tremendous tactical successes and victories against al-Qaeda, but on a strategic level, al-Qaeda is expanding while we are scoring some of these important tactical victories.
It's a classic intelligence tactic to leak news of an infiltration to sow discord in enemy ranks. Do you think to any degree that's happening now inside al-Qaeda and associated groups as they look to see who this double agent associated with, become suspicious of anybody that he had contact with?
Yes, but not to the strategic level that we seem to see. Meaning, of course, if we have a person infiltrating al-Qaeda, especially if we do it with the Saudis who have great experience, who knows the ideology, and they were partially also part of the success, this is going to create a reaction within the operational network of al-Qaeda. But is this going to impact the madrasas? Is this going to impact the recruitment of more jihadists? No. If you look at their chat rooms product, you'll see that they're going to say, well, this was a defeat, but we are here to expand and gain more and more support around the globe and specifically in the Middle East. So yes, again, from our perspective, we have to be very careful. From our perspective, this is a victory that may create reverberation inside al-Qaeda. From the al-Qaeda perspective, this is a loss, but they're moving forward.
Apart from the double agent setback, you see al-Qaeda and associated groups actually gaining ground in key areas despite the elimination of Osama bin Laden, most notably now in Syria. Some experts blame it for the most recent deadly attacks on Assad government targets. What's your view on that and al-Qaeda's goal in Syria?
Let me make a distinction between how we in the West in general, and America in particular, look at al-Qaeda, both successes and defeats, and how they look at themselves. We are fighting against the al-Qaeda of 2001. Most of the key figures that we are eliminating, beginning with Osama bin Laden, to al-Awlaki and others, have been the historic leaders and founders or main leaders of al-Qaeda. Real al-Qaeda on the ground is now metastasizing and expanding in Africa, in Yemen, in Somalia, and of course in Syria. And in Syria, the al-Qaeda network is not just al-Qaeda. You have Salafi jihadists, and they have been in Syria for a long period of time. Now is an opportunity for them because there is a breakdown between the regime and the opposition, as was the case in Libya, as was the case in Yemen. They are taking advantage and trying to expand and create their enclaves inside Syria.
So are they working in association to some degree with old allies within the Assad regime? Are they totally independent? I mean, their activity there is making potential supporters of rebel forces very concerned about giving support that may end up being used against us as it was in Afghanistan.
Absolutely, and we need to be very careful in extending our support. I have advised many times many members of Congress not to engage in the so-called quote-unquote supporting the rebels of Syria. There are many rebels, many networks, the seculars, the democracy promoters, even the Muslim conservatives and Christian minorities and Kurds. Those need to be supported. But you have Salafi jihadi networks and militias growing across Syria because we have been in the international community very late in coming to help the Syrian people. Of course, al-Qaeda and the jihadists are going to come from a variety of points in the Middle East and insert themselves in the struggle, making it very difficult now for the international community to extend their support to a global resistance. We have to be more specific and see which part of that resistance we need to support.
Talk about al-Qaeda inroads in the multi-militia matrix of Libya after Gaddafi.
Well, basically in Libya, we had a choice to bring down Gaddafi and, of course, after that, support the rebels. Meanwhile, there was a struggle within the rebels between the seculars, the ex-military, the ex-bureaucrats, and the Islamist militias. The Islamist militias, at the end of the day, won the game on the inside. They are the ones who are in control of government. But those Islamist militias are of many backgrounds, and they control different areas and different places of the country. And they do also, sometimes fight against each other. The bottom line is that in Libya, what you're going to see is the rise of an Islamist regime that would be very rich, that has the petrodollars, and will be inclined to support Islamist militias, for example, in northern Mali, in the Sahel area, in many places in Africa. And that's why we need to be very careful about how do we support, who do we support when a change occurs in the Middle East.
How do you see the situation in Egypt, where the long-feared Muslim Brotherhood now seems to be among the more moderate Islamist factions?
This is, again, another projection of how we read the Islamists. I mean, all Islamist agendas end up in the same direction: the establishment of an emirate, the establishment of a full-fledged, narrow Sharia-implemented state, and ultimately the caliphate. The way to get there, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood have distinguished themselves in accepting the political process to gain power, and once they gain power, they start to implement those laws and will become increasingly more authoritarian against the seculars and the minorities. But next to them, more radical than them, are the Salafi jihadists or the Salafists in Egypt who wants to do a shortcut, who do want to engage in jihad. So now that's why we call the Muslim Brotherhood more moderate than the more radical Salafists. But at the end of the day, once they will have power, they will want to implement the same political agenda.
Dr. Walid Phares is a professor of global strategies and advisor to the U.S. House of Representatives Anti-Terrorism Caucus. His latest book is The Coming Revolution: Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, from Threshold Editions.
Quote from the news: I have a mindset that says bipartisanship ought to consist of Democrats coming to the Republican point of view. That was Indiana Treasurer Richard Murdoch, a Tea Party favorite, after trouncing long-term incumbent GOP Senator Richard Lugar and giving Democrats more hope of recapturing that seat in November.
Next, in Icon's Independence, Jackie after O, for your ears only.